All right. Welcome, everyone. I'm so glad to be here with two of my favorite people. It's always fun when fellow coworkers join the broadcast. So I am here with advanced trainers, Emma Hedman and Lisa Davis, and they are hanging out today in Lisa's training space out in Chilliwack. I was excited to see them both in the same space. It's neat for us post-COVID anytime people are together. So if you are joining us on Zoom, you can click on that chat button right now and tell us where you're joining us from. If you want to ask questions, you can click the Q&A button and type your questions into the Q&A box. And if you're joining us on Facebook Live, feel free to just throw any questions you might have for these two lovely ladies into the comment section on Facebook Live. So I am just getting organized here. Oh my goodness, so many comments already. Okay, people just signing in and telling us where they're signing in from and saying, hello, Lisa, and hello, Emma. So thank you so much.
On our screen, should we set that up so we see that, or are you gonna just let us know?
I will let you know, so you don't have to worry at all. So yeah, you don't have to worry about it. So I will read off the questions as they come in, but let's start with the question we always start with. Tell us, I'm gonna volunteer Lisa first. Tell us how you came to be part of the PADS family. How did that little journey unfold?
I've been trying to wrap my brain about how I even heard about PADS in 1997, because I don't even remember. I think I maybe saw an ad in a newspaper. And then I signed up for volunteering and then puppy raising, and then I did various stuff. And then I was gone having children for a while, and then came back on staff in 2014.
Okay, you have to actually share where you came from to come back to PADS, because you moved a very long way to come work for us.
I did. I was living in Norway at the time. My husband had a 3-year contract out there, and I saw a posting that I thought would suit me, and I was, I think, a little bored from being a parent and not working too, so I was pretty excited to try something and get back to work. And I tried to sign up for puppy raising in Norway, but I was like 3 hours away from the closest service dog training place from Oslo, so and I just went from there.
That would be a long commute, yes. So, all right. And what about you, Emma? How did you come to be part of PADS?
I started out as a puppy raiser, and then very shortly after that started helping out with puppy classes, and then kind of transferred from helping out to teaching some classes, and then just kind of have bounced around a little bit within. I've had a few different staff positions. Yes. Yeah, a few different roles. But yeah, landed now with advanced training and helping out with whelping for the last 6+ months, I think. And yeah, so started out, puppy raising very briefly, but then kind of found all the different staff roles that one can have and work with dogs.
Exactly. Well, and so we touched on a couple of things. So Lisa started out as our puppy raising supervisor and kind of canine programs coordinator, and then moved into advanced training. And Emma similarly started out as a trainer in our puppy program, and then kind of evolved into our breeding program, helping with whelping and stuff. And yeah, so now is an advanced trainer, but also still helps with whelping, which is good because she and I live very, very far apart, which is good because it means we've got great coverage of all of our breeder caretakers. So, all right, so let's dive in here. We have our very first question from Nicole Whitford and wants to know, what is your favorite part about training PADS dogs? We'll just keep bouncing back and forth. I started with Lisa, so I'll start with Lisa again.
Yeah, it's that paycheck at the end. you know, not the monetary one, but the seeing the dogs with the clients and just where they land and clients.
Yeah. And what about you, Emma?
I think my favorite thing is the individual dogs and kind of figuring out what the plans are going to be with their like problems and their awesome selves.
Yeah.
It's always different. Like it's always a unique experience training each dog. So that keeps you very engaged and yeah.
That's very cool. Well, and so the next question actually kind of segues very nicely off of that. What are some of the challenges you find with training when the dogs return from the raisers? So what are some of the things that are challenging when you're getting, and you guys just had a new turn-in of dogs. So are there some kind of common trends of things that are challenging when you get new dogs on your string?
Definitely is. They all go through that transitional period where it takes us a couple of weeks to get to know who they are. So they tend to be usually on the activation kind of end. Some will be a bit inhibited, but we see more that are kind of activated, and we have to kind of wait for all that to cool off and practice some really relaxing kind of exercises and teach them the rules of a new place. Yeah, they just gotta get into it and get used to it and meet new dogs.
Yeah. Anything you notice, Emma?
I have a pretty unique environment in that I'm on a farm with various farm animals and just kind of probably a pretty different environment than most of them have been living in, except for maybe the odd few. So my kind of like across the board for the first little bit is getting them comfortable in the environment and figuring out, if there's anything that they're kind of worried about. We have a big Tom turkey named Paul, and he changes shape constantly. Literally, he goes from a little like sleek bird to a big, huge, popped out manly man. And I find a lot of the dogs have to meet him several times before they're okay with existing near Paul.
Oh my gosh. Also, I love that your turkey's name is Paul.
Of course it is.
It's the best name for a turkey, but also just fascinating. And I think it's one of the cool things we see it with puppy raisers as well. And for those watching that aren't aware, both Emma and Lisa train out of kind of home training setups, which kind of increases our capacity, allows us to train more dogs because our kennel can kind of only hold so many. But yeah, it injects new challenges, but also new different options for the dogs being turned in. And so I think that's an interesting thing to touch on, because I know some of the dogs, Emma, on your stream came to you just because the kennel environment was a little tough for them. Do you want to talk about how the advanced training team kind of looks at dogs coming in to advanced training and kind of makes those decisions, either of you, around like where dogs go when they come in?
Well, it's kind of a complex thing, really, and I think like quite often the dogs you're getting get looked at Burnaby sometimes first, right? And then they're like, okay, this dog needs Emma, or this dog needs Lisa. Usually Emma, because she's got that.
It's such a different, it's a very different environment. I don't have a kennel, traditional kind of kennel setup. It's very much like home and sort of sectioned off into different areas. So, but we do get really nice feedback from puppy raisers and from the cohort trainers, like your cohort trainer that you've been with. Especially most recently, we've gotten really good kind of detailed descriptions of the dogs, what they've seen throughout their whole puppy raising, what their specific challenges are. So even before they come in, we're starting to be able to kind of shift and say, okay, this one might look better, in this kind of environment, or, this one might be, having a really good time at the kennel and just loves to learn all the time. And, it's pretty solid about that kind of place. But So yeah, so that feedback from the raisers is a very important key. We kind of want to get to know them, what they've been like, throughout their adolescence. And then we make changes. Like we're very flexible, right? It's whatever the dog's best environment will be. Right now we're in the very initial phases of having new dogs, and we know that it might not stay. The dogs that came to me, we might kind of, once we figured out a little bit more about them, they might go, oh, you know what, this dog might do better on this string. So we just kind of let them take the lead.
Yeah, that's very cool. So again, another turn-in related question, and I can probably speak to this a little bit because I know it's something we're trying to kind of dig into data-wise as well. But have any of you noticed differences between kind of the dogs that come in from the different regions? So if you're getting a turn-in of dogs, do you notice any kind of like things across the board in dogs from different regions, or are they all pretty much the same?
Well, pretty much the same. They kind of come out the same way. They've all got their strengths, and they all got their stuff that they just have a little more work to do. And yeah, I think it's one of those things. There's so many variables in every dog, right? It's where they were raised, who they were raised by, what genetics are behind them, what experiences they've had. So we've got 3 amazing regions that are working really hard with their dogs. So I think, it's interesting to like, for me on the data end of things, to drill in and kind of look at like, what we're seeing in terms of like, if we're looking at success rates, do we see differences between litters? Do we see differences between regions, et cetera? And I know we've learned a lot from our different regions over the years in terms of like what works or what doesn't, from the human end of things, in terms of like, how do we kind of build a good program for our volunteers. So when we've had really good data to kind of drill into, that kind of looks at, volunteer retention rates and things like that. So maybe down the road, we'll have cool data on dogs too. But anyway, I'm scrolling through more questions here. So Ingrid asks, with all of the dogs' personalities, do you ever have a dog that you just don't click with? I would say yes. Some grow on you.
I usually find they do. Yeah, especially when they're in our homes. The ones that I kind of right away, I'm like, oh, okay, I'm gonna have to, work a little bit at this. Just their proximity to you, you kind of start to find the things you like. But we have our preferences for, what we get along with, and sometimes it's not even like, you can't even describe it. There's just dogs that come in that you click with, that you're like, I don't even know why, but you're just my kind.
Well, I think that's what makes us like be diverse trainers, and I allow us to have different dogs and stuff. Because if you don't really click with the dog, or you're just like, I'm not seeing what I need to see, someone else can look at this dog. It might be my blind spot, or so.
And I know, like, I mean, just from the outside looking in, I've seen like, dogs move between strings. And I, obviously that's always looking at what's best for the dog. But I can imagine that, if you have a dog that you're working really hard with and just not making headway, I'm sure there is an element of that is relationship based, and, not necessarily that we're good at or bad at forging relationships. But I know for me too, I've had dogs that I've raised that like literally from the moment I had them, I just felt like I had really nice communication with them and connection with them, and others that I had to work so hard to build that. Like, it was just really, I think it's sort of like people. There's people you meet that you just instantly kind of gel with, and other people where relationships take a little more work, right? Like you don't necessarily communicate in the same way. So anyway, that's a really interesting question. So
and the dogs bond differently, right? Some of them really like lots of touch, and maybe I'm not the touchy kind, I am, but or some just like to hang back and not be touched, and they'd rather just like play a game or something like that. So finding what they like is kind of how you build that bond.
Yeah. Fanny's just commenting that Jules must be having fun with all the farm animals, and I would imagine they get to observe them a lot. Do they get to interact with the farm animals much, Emma? What does that look like?
Mostly they're observing for the safety of the dogs and the animals. We do, all of the animals on the farm are very like well socialized. Um, there's a lot of kids that come and do classes in this environment, and it's quite a busy place. So most of the time my challenge is that the dog needs more space than whatever animal they're looking at is willing to give them. The chickens are coming right up to the fence to come, and anytime there's a new dog, they're like, cool, let's go and see.
They can tell new dogs.
They absolutely can. Yeah. And sometimes it's like, guys, no, like, wait a sec. So I get more cooperation out of the dog side for sure.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Sarah Gallagher's asking, what behavior do you most appreciate in dogs that are turned into advanced training from puppy raising? And what's the hardest behavior to shift at the time of turn in? I'm assuming she's meaning if it's challenging or if it's not good.
I have two. I kind of keep coming up against the same two, and it's the same answer really, because the skills and things that we most love when they come in to advanced training are usually that reason, because they're the hardest to make headway with. So my biggest ones are loose leash walking and recall, I think are if I get a dog that comes in and right away I can tell there's some kind of sensitivity around the leash, they kind of have that little bit of understanding. I'm not expecting perfection by any means. I'm very much expecting to kind of be dragged around a little bit before we get a nice communication system going. But I can kind of tell when there's been some education there, and it's so easy to build on that, as opposed to a dog that's kind of been desensitized to, hauling somebody around. And recall, the same thing. I mean, just safety wise and the comfort of, I like to take my dogs off leash for exercise as much as possible, and that can be inhibited by a lack of a really solid recall, because I've got to work on that and make sure I've got that trust before we get up into the mountains and I just let them have at it. So those would be my two.
Yeah, definitely loose leash feeling is pretty important for our safety and for theirs as well. I don't know. One of the things that I like to see is a dog who's not trying to sniff and pick up everything off the ground, because that one's so hard to break. So if I get a dog that comes in who's like, no, I know that's not mine, because they've been reversing, that's not mine, then I'm like, oh, good, I'm not going to have to fight that all the time and manage that. So that one I really like as well, because it's hard to get rid of.
Yeah. Michelle's just saying, must feel so proud of all the dogs, those that graduate, those that don't. I think that I think no matter what stage of the journey we're in with these dogs, that when you bond with them, it just is such a cool feeling seeing them land where they're meant to be. And it's hard. I won't speak for you two. I'll let you speak to this, but I'm going to build on Michelle's question, is like, what is that like for you, both when a dog graduates and when they don't? Because I think it's something that we forget a little bit for the advanced trainers, is that it's your job, but these are living, breathing creatures that you bond with. So what is that journey like kind of emotionally for you when a dog graduates, or when you've worked really hard with a dog and they choose a different career path or a different kind of life for themselves?
I cry. I'm very much emotionally invested in all of them. I'm perhaps too empathetic sometimes, but what makes me a good trainer is those little nuances and things that I can see and I feel. But then I also put that into everything. And yeah, so it is emotional. You get excited, you get disappointed, you get the whole like, I need a little bit of this dog, a little bit of this dog.
Yeah.
Or like, this is amazing, this dog. But so those are where the tough parts are too, where you're just like, oh, where can we fit this dog? Because they are all so amazing. So trying to figure out how can we fit them somewhere, where would they go? And then work.
All the work, all the time.
Yeah.
Okay, so many questions today. I love this so much. So Kylie is asking, seeing as your home is your workplace, is it hard to turn off work mode? You must put in extra hours beyond the standard kind of 9 to 5. What does that look like?
Yes.
I mean, it's like puppy raising, basically, because I've done both. They're there. It's not like you clock out and disengage with this little family of dogs that you've got. It is 24/7 in a way. I have definitely tried to sort of set my day to have kind of set times that I, am working, like we're actively working on training sessions and things that I'm doing, but I don't kid myself that it's always, if you're around a dog, you're influencing behavior. So it has its pros and cons. For me, the pros very far outweigh the cons of having them in my space. I definitely, for the most part, am pretty happy with the setup. Every once in a while, I'm like, oh my God, go away. But
So many dogs.
so many dogs. Yeah.
I find I learn who they are faster
Yes.
than I would when I did do the advanced out of the kennel. Because you're spending so much more time with them, you're seeing what they're like and their routines just all the time. Like for me, it's 4 dogs at a time at my house that are Pad's dogs. And you're cleaning kennels, you're grooming dogs, you're feeding them, you're toileting, you're training them. Like you've got everything that you have to do, and it's not the easiest. A little hard having volunteers in your house because it's yeah. Because I've had some nice offers and stuff like that of people to help, but it's just time I need help, like maybe in the evenings or the mornings, but just doesn't really work that way. But thankfully I've got support from my husband. So he'll help me with some feeding and things like that. But, you're never really turning things off. So,
yeah. Some more questions coming in, and we might have to cut this off before we get through all the questions, everybody. I don't know if this has ever happened before. So, so Nicole is asking, how long is a dog in advanced training these days? And I very quickly went and pulled the stat on the dogs that have graduated since our last graduation. They've averaged 12 months in advanced training. So those are dogs that have graduated since our last graduation. So those are the most kind of current up-to-date numbers, but that includes also like not just their training time, but matching them, et cetera, because advanced training ends the day they start team training. So there's often a month or 2, or sometimes even more, where they're ready, but they have to go through that matching process and meeting the clients and stuff. So so I don't know how long that time takes, but that's the average right now. But the second half of Nicole's question, has COVID affected how you train?
Oh yeah, definitely. Like your field trips are totally different.
Yeah.
It affects, for me, affects more the training of the AFDs than service dog training.
Yeah. Just because of the amount of, so for those that don't know that are watching, can you tell us why? So AFDs are accredited facility dogs.
Facility dogs, and we have to kind of figure out what kind of facilities they like being in and where they're comfortable in. Like, can they go into schools? Do they like courtrooms and look at the sirens? Like, there's just all these other questions that need to be answered that are hard to answer without access to different places. So, because we really need those answers, we don't want a place before we know. If the dog's comfortable, like we used to be able to, walk into hospitals and do dog training, no permission needed. You just go and you get to be around sounds and the different people, and so we just don't have any of that anymore. So yeah, do some sounds on your phone.
It's going to turn you into ambulance chasers. Like, where
Yeah.
where can we find the sounds? But Tiff just says, I have 2 pups that are excited to see both of you for very different reasons in the nearest futures. So I feel like there's an inside story there. But Lorena asked, do your dogs still go to, oh yes, right. I'm like, hang on a sec. One going into advanced training, another one having puppies. So, do your dog, Lurleen's just asking, do your dogs still go to advanced sitters every weekend?
Yeah, usually, I often have one left over. We'll see. Who knows? Or if we need to keep hanging on to one for a reason, but yeah.
I drive into Burnaby, so I still use the campus as kind of my meeting spot for my weekend sitters. So that's worked out pretty well, that I kind of can keep that little bit of a line there.
Yeah, give you a break for the weekends. So, which I think sort of answers the question Trisha is asking is, do the dogs stay 24/7 in the home environment training?
5.
Yeah, 24/5. So yeah, so they spend 5 days a week in home environments with Lisa and Emma training, but then they go to different home environments on the weekends with volunteers. But Lisa, do the dogs stay kind of in your home overnight, or do you have more of a kennel setup in?
They stay here overnight. I have dog run in my garage. It's also my training center. When I've got everything set up, but yeah, I've got kennels in there, and then sleep in there. Have their kennel time in there. Yeah, they eat in there. We're in my office right now, in the house part of my house, but yeah.
Okay. So Kylia has a question. I'm like, I'm hoping that one of you understands what this means. If apples are to Groot as the square root of pi is to pizza, do you have a favorite dog you have trained?
I know
Kylia.
That's as far as I followed that.
Apples are to Groot.
Basically, yeah. There's no such thing as a favorite dog, I don't think.
They all have their different reasons for their favorites in different ways. Like,
yeah,
there's the favorite to hang out with, the favorite to train new skills, the favorite to go on field trips with, and then all of them just kind of get a piece of your heart. Like, they all kind of find a way into being that side of that relationship. But yeah, like kids.
Sometimes you love them, sometimes you hate them.
I don't always like them, but I always love them.
I'm feeling that way about a certain fluffy thing in my house.
A certain dog that loves to like push past me occasionally, and that is, or won't come back when called, but like love him to death.
Yeah,
absolutely. I really do. He's like such a cool dog, but then you're like, oh. As you can all relate, all you puppy raisers.
Yeah.
Oh my goodness. So many questions, and I want to be mindful of your time. Do you guys have a few more minutes? Okay. Do you use infinity collars? I don't even know what that is for the sniffing pulling issue. Do you know what it is?
I've not heard of one.
I don't know what that is.
I've not heard of that either. So I would say the answer to that is Maybe. Is there another term for them? Maybe, Trish, if you want to pop into the comments, if there's or if you can describe what it is. We use a lot of different equipment at pads for various things. So, but I know there's a lot of different brand names out there for things. So, Michelle just says, thanks so much for working so hard with Levi. And Vanessa asks, how much of the training is physical for the dogs? She's Judah's razor. So
Judah. How much is physical?
For us or physical for the dog?
I think she means for the dog, just knowing that dog. I guess, I mean, there's kind of a physical component to everything that we do with them. Because behavior, it's only behavior if the dog is behaving. If they're doing nothing, then that's, yeah, we can't really train that. So yeah, I'm not sure exactly how to answer that. Depends on what they're being trained for. There's definitely some streams that are way more physical than others, like our pulling dogs and our racing dogs. And, you know, like that is a big component to that is their bodies. But
we send those dogs to really energetic Miranda.
Yes.
She does love those dogs. She loves those pulling dogs.
But I think it is interesting. I know, Emma, we talked about this when you were training Cadence as well, as like you were working on her pull cue, which is a very physical thing, like pulling into the harness. And like you can't do 47,000 reps in a day on a dog when they're.
And then she has to go to chiro.
Then she has to go to the chiropractor. Yeah. So there is, you know, there is an element of like pacing the dogs as they're learning the more physically intensive skills, where they have to build up new
moving
sets
the table.
Oh, apparently the table's moving. Okay. Ingrid is just saying, Lisa, thanks so much for all you've done with Zaria. And that's lovely. Zaria is a dog that Lisa trained, that's now placed with Ingrid. So, Trish says I answered her question already. What factors do you think influence how easily a dog adapts to leaving the razor's home to enter advanced training?
Doing transitions, being a little familiar with what they're like.
Utilizing the sitters, I think, making sure your puppies had some experiences with other people in other environments. And I know our new program with the sitters being organized by our team, that's a lot easier now because that's taken into account is what's the environment and what the dog hasn't, you know, experienced and what they have. And a lot of daytime crating. That's a big one.
Yeah.
Their nighttime crating, I tend to find most of the dogs come in, they're pretty happy to sleep overnight, but there's a fair few that come in that struggle with being confined during the day when other things are happening. And when you're working multiple dogs, that's definitely a key skill to have. So yeah.
I think that's a really important thing, and our puppy raising programs talked about that a lot, is that it's this beautiful balance of ensuring that your dog has had some good sitting opportunities or puppy swaps, but kind of within reason as well, right? Like if they get bounced around a lot, that can actually, you know, kind of have the opposite effect where, you know, then it's just like, you know, the dog has, you know, harder time with it than if, you know, they've had some, you know, some really, you know, good positive experience with transitioning between handlers. I know some of the dogs I raised didn't transition well. And so we actually did like they went to other people for, you know, 6 months or whatever, just to learn that being with another person is fine, right? Like they can handle that. So, but, okay, hang on. how do you feel your pet dogs deal with the excess of sharing time as well? Yeah, that's something you both have. So you both have pet dogs. We won't talk about how many, but you both have pet dogs. And how do they handle the influx of new dogs in their space, or even just dogs in their space?
I've found the weekends are important, so they get a break. I would say without having the dogs kind of going away on the weekends, I might not notice that my own pet dogs are just kind of a little bit of a low level of kind of stress and in their environment, except that I do notice a difference in them on the weekend. So that's kind of one of the things that's important to me in my place, is that I make sure I'm giving them breaks. Other than that, though, my guys go from neutral, they just don't really want anything to do with any new dogs, that they don't see them and they don't hear them and they don't exist, to pretty good at teaching different play styles and, kind of liking that side of it. It's also very good because my guys run rampant around my house and they're on the furniture and they're all over the place. So it's good proofing for the pet dogs. So you may see a dog doing something. That does not mean that you get to partake.
Okay, so Trish clarified what she meant by infinity collars was gentle leaders. So do you guys use those in advanced training sometimes? Yeah. Okay. And then Cindy's asking, how long do service dogs work before they retire? Is there a difference between mobility and AFDs? Do you guys want me to take that one, or do you know?
Go ahead. Yeah.
Go for it.
Yeah, so I would say on average, our service dogs like retire typically between 9 and 10 years old on average for service, and they can work significantly longer in AFD roles. Like I'm thinking about, I want to say Macbeth, was he 14? He was definitely up there.
15, yeah.
He was a rare one.
That's rare though. Like I wouldn't say that's the norm. I would say our AFDs would probably average between 10 and 12 for kind of retirement age. And I mean, we really actually want our dogs to have a retirement as well. We don't want them to, work, right up to kind of the end. I mean, obviously there are situations that no one can predict that happen sometimes with health issues, et cetera, but certainly they've worked hard. We want them to have those retirement years. So but the AFD roles tend to be less physically demanding on the dog's bodies than mobility work, where, if you have a pulling dog or a bracing dog or something like that, where they're really using their bodies on a daily basis. So
well, they just have to go everywhere with someone, right? Whereas your AFDs just have that. They're only working in this area. They don't grocery store shop. They don't do everything. So you get those dogs that want to keep walking that much. For some people, it just doesn't work.
Yeah, for sure. So Vanessa's just laughing and said Emma knows what I'm asking. I'm assuming that's referring back to the question about how much of the training is physical. Earlier, but anyway, Angela's asking, is PAD still training bracing dogs? I've heard some schools are discontinuing this style of training. We are, but they're a bit of our unicorn dogs still, like trying to find a dog that has the physical stature and strength to do that kind of work, and the kind of control, like in terms of being able to be calm enough that they're not going to pull on leash, et cetera, and knock somebody off balance, but also have the working drive to do the skills, et cetera. So it's not that we're not placing them, but they're fewer and farther between than our other service dogs. So
they take a quieter, calmer personality, but they also, like you said, they got to have that working drive. It's a hard little combo to find.
Yeah.
I think it's people on the wait list for that. So we're trying.
Yeah. I think, I look at Cadence and I think probably the thing that makes her, because she's very motivated to work, especially if there's food involved at times, snacks. We love our snacks. But she is kind of by default quite a calm dog. But yeah, it's trying to kind of find that middle ground. But I would say I probably have to reinforce at a much higher rate than the average client to kind of keep that enthusiasm around doing the skills up, because it's interesting. Anyway, and I'm just going to touch on, so Angela, you're asking that question, and I know some of there's been kind of some discussion around discontinuing that training in terms of like, not wanting to use dogs for kind of that physical kind of bracing style work. One of the things we work really hard at is ensuring that like we have really good equipment on the dogs, so that they're able to do that work in a way that kind of protects their bodies and kind of sets them up for success, et cetera. I know there's kind of been some discussion about that. So, sorry, I'm just scrolling. There's so many questions. Oh, Lurleen's just asking, where do retired PADS dogs go? And so many options, so many options. So the first option always is staying with their client. So, and that is the case for many of our retired dogs. They can stay with their client, particularly I think our AFDs. I think almost all of our AFDs retire and stay with their clients through their retirement. I can't think of any that have kind of moved on. But with our mobility hearing clients, we don't have any PTSD dogs yet that are nearing retirement. We haven't kind of gone through that cycle yet, but so I'll speak for mobility and hearing is in a lot of those situations, the client needs to get another working dog fairly quickly. And so sometimes that is challenging, that their lifestyle or their home environment or their home itself, their physical, kind of constraints of where they live is challenging to keep a dog in retirement. So often those dogs go to a close friend or family member. And if that's not an option, then PADS helps support the adoption process. So we have people that want to adopt dogs that have retired from work. And that's a really fantastic thing that some people do, that they're willing to take an older dog and just pamper them and let them kind of enjoy that retirement. But it really is up to the client. And so we kind of walk through that process with them as their dog kind of hits that stage of life. And our goal is always, if they need another dog, to kind of, make that transition as smooth as possible. So, okay, I'm going to answer one more question and then I'm going to let you both go because we're way over time now. But the last question was, does all the equipment come free with the dog to the client? And so, yes, there is, our clients pay a team training fee when they come to team training, but any kind of equipment that they need to get started, they get a kit that includes bowls and toys and treat pouch and clickers. And I'm trying to think what all is in there. Do you remember, Lisa?
Yeah.
All the things.
Chew bones and maybe some poop bags and say grooming stuff.
Yeah. So their grooming equipment, that's a good point, like nail clippers and
Leash
brushes.
And collar.
And yeah. Their leash and collar, their vest or their harness or backpack, whatever that looks like for the individual client. And then
food.
They get their first bag of food. And then after that, the clients are responsible for covering the cost of vet care and food. We do certainly have, contingencies in place if there's something really extraordinary that a client is dealing with, that PADS is always there to support them. But for the most part, the clients, when they take on a dog, take on the responsibility for the ongoing maintenance cost. And, if they want to buy new leashes or toys or, collars or things like that, that is then the client's responsibility. So, but they don't pay for the dog at all. So, but with that, I have one more comment that I just notice from Laura as well, that just says, these ladies are the best. PADS and our dogs are so very lucky to have them as trainers. And I couldn't agree more. So, And which I think is a really nice note to finish on. But thank you both so much for joining us today. I know you have a couple dogs around, and people always get mad at me when there's a Tune In Tuesday and there's been no dogs at all. Any chance of bringing your dogs on camera?
Wake up.
Wake up, wake up. Oh, they're sleeping as good service dogs do when their people are busy.
Oh, come here.
Over here. There's a dog.
Star. This is Star.
Oh,
Here's this one.
oh, so sorry, who do you have?
Sonar.
Star and Sonar?
Are in the office hanging. Two beautiful blondes.
They are.
Yeah.
Pretty blonde girls and very quiet blonde girls through all
Yeah,
of this.
they were just, coming near our hands and wagging their tails on the desk and jiggling the thing a little bit but we're happy to have fun with a pet.
Yeah, always.
Yes, exactly. All good, Well, thank you both so much for joining us, and everybody for all of the amazing questions. This has been such a fun session, and really appreciate the two of you taking time out of your days. Oh my goodness gracious. And Star's like, this is my trainer right here.
She just got here from Calgary. Isn't she cute?
Hi, Star. Well, thank you both so much. Have a great rest of your day. And I so appreciate both of you too. So keep doing all the good stuff and have fun with the dogs, and we'll see you soon.
Bye.
Take care, everyone. Thanks for joining us.
Bye.
Bye.